Hi, welcome to My Favorite Mistake. I'm your host, Mark Graven. Our guest today is Kate Lowry. She is, among other things, a CEO coach, a venture capitalist, author of the book Unbreakable: How to Thrive Under Fear-Based Leaders. So that title certainly caught my attention, and it's a serious topic, and fear-based leadership is not something I'm a fan of, but I look forward to digging into what Kate has learned and what she shares with others in the book. So Kate developed this approach through decades of experience in different startups and venture capital, big tech, and management consulting. Her work focuses on helping people find agency and practical strategies when they're stuck under these leaders who, all editorialized, unfortunately, rule through fear and control. Kate, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me, Mark. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. The book has been out since last year. Congratulations on the launch. And again, excited to discuss that topic. But first, as we do here, we'll see if this is related to experiences that you talk about in the book or otherwise. What's your favorite mistake?
My favorite mistake was something early in my career. When I was fresh out of college, I was so gung-ho and happy and also naive.
Yeah.
And what I did not understand is that most of the systems, like the workplaces or hobbies or things that I was participating in, were not designed to benefit me. I think, for example, you join a company like McKinsey and they invest tons of training and development in you, and that's great. And college me would think, oh, babies care about them so much. When really, consultants are the frontline product of a consulting firm. And so R&D in you is R&D in their product, which is what earns them.
Sure.
And early on in my career at McKinsey, I saw the first time someone do something illegal at work. And being the very zealous young person I was, I immediately went, this is wrong. I went every room that this is wrong.
Yeah.
So, I reporters the own by it. I smashed this person in reviews and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And surprisingly, that definitely came back to bite me. Where, I got slammed in reviews for not being a team player and things like that. And, you could debate how wrong was what I saw, et cetera, et cetera. But that wasn't the first time that I really realized, oh, hey, HR is not here for me. And this company is not for me. And if people do bad things in business sometimes, if they're a profit center or if they're more higher than you on the ladder, that's not going to help you, when thinking about this. And this is something that I've had to deal with at a lot of different places in my career. And it was really hard to realize.
Yeah.
Teammate that was very upset. She was being mistreated, and I wanted to help her, right? And that's when I started learning that the best ways to help people are sometimes more sophisticated, right? Because we're going to be sophisticated actors against you sometimes. You need to bring equal sophistication up against them.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sorry to hear that. I'm not surprised, unfortunately. Not because of the name McKinsey, but thinking of just large companies. One thing that resonates with me, I faced similar disappointment in adults. In my first job out of college, I didn't see things that would be a matter of illegal, but I saw things that were unsafe or unethical in different ways. And I had that same reaction of well, that's wrong, and I should say something. And that doesn't always work out.
Yeah, I'm not a lawyer, so I can't say what's legal or illegal. But what I can say is that there are often things in these systems where people are very powerful that grate against people's values. And it can be really hard, right? When you're a cog in the wheel, you don't know if you should make a fuss or not. But if you stay silent, it eats at you. And that's a really tough position to be.
Yeah. And to me, a healthy culture would encourage people to, it would say, if in doubt, speak up. If you're not sure, if something is illegal or unethical, or, to speak up, and that there would be a non-punitive response if you were making, a well-intended, candid report. Are you at liberty to say, like, what type of illegal act?
Yeah. I observed like someone threatening someone else, like in a way that could constitute blackmail, and that the thing that was being held over someone else's head, you determined things like whether or not they could live in the. Obviously, someone on my team was very upset about that. Again, I'm not a lawyer, so I can't say how legal it was, but I can say that she was very upset. And I think that what's so hard about being in these halls of power is that, if you stay, you gain power that you can use yourself to be a positive influence. But to do that, you have to go through all of these hoops where people have power over you. And, at my time at McKinsey, I think I had something like 20 managers because you switch projects every 2 months. And, at that time, maybe 20% of the managers were people that really made your life miserable.
Mm-hmm.
It can be hard to know whether it's worth sticking around for that. And now, in this era of fear-based leadership where there's so much pressure for 996 and founder mode and things like that, it's generally quite hard because all of a sudden it's like cool to be cruel. We're seeing people who are essentially saying, well, I'm big and powerful, so I have to do these crazy things or else people won't respect me. And then I start getting concerned. And, I work with both CEOs and also I advise some plaintiffs, and then I work with AI models. And so much of it is about being someone that they like being, that at the end of the day, they can go home and say, yeah, I like and love myself because I'm living my values. But it'll keep becoming increasingly less.
Yeah. And there are some, I'll say, bad examples out there of leaders and people who are very successful, and some might draw maybe an overly simplistic cause and effect connection between, that person is successful because they're cruel, or they don't care about people, or they're a sociopath, or they're an a-hole, instead of looking and saying, like, well, maybe they're successful because they had a great idea and took action at the right moment. Maybe they would have been more successful not being a fear-based leader. It's kind of an unknowable question to pose, but what are your thoughts around some of that?
I don't think it's unknowable. And McKinsey, I was training business best practices at Meta. I was similarly trained. And the best HBR research from Harvard, that people do their best work when they feel safe. They do their best work when they feel like they're allowed to throw out big ideas and they won't get judged. Yeah. And so fear-based leadership really kills innovation, because if you keep your direct reports in a fear state, their like amygdala is activated, called amygdala hype. They can't actually access the parts of their brains that do strategy and think about all of those things.
Yeah. And feeling safe to speak up, feeling safe to disagree, feeling safe to report something that seems wrong or is wrong. An environment of psychological safety doesn't mean no pressure. It doesn't mean we're sitting around eating ice cream all day and chilling out. I mean, I think sometimes people create this false connection between, safety and comfort. They misunderstand what psychological safety is meant to be.
Psychological safety is not this like soft, warm, fuzzy hug I'm going to give you at birth. Psychological safety means that I trust you and you trust me. And we work together and collaborate because together we're greater than the sum of our parts. And if you're able to actually activate the potential of everyone at your company, that is a really huge deal. Because all of a sudden, if you have people performing at peak performance, rather than exhausted and burnt out and scared and wondering if they could be, boom. I often tell my coaching clients, I can't guarantee returns because I can't guarantee you're going to take my But, the average returns for founders in my coaching practice are like a 10x return on fees within 3 months. And because they increase fundraising, they close more deals, etc. The reality is when people are happy, supported, and have support in being, their very best selves, magical things happen.
Yeah. Yeah. So before we talk about the book, maybe just kind of wrap up your story there at McKinsey. Not to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like you think, well, this, was a mistake in the sense it wasn't what you hoped it would be. I imagine you left before the punitive nature of things could harm you any more than it did.
Yeah, I did end up leaving McKinsey after 3 years, which is pretty normal. But in my final year there, I was really scared because my performance was extremely high. The teams that I was on were telling me that my performance was really high. But I essentially had a mark on my record. And at McKinsey, if you finish as a business analyst or senior business analyst, you get what's called an offer to return. An offer to return means you can come back anytime in the next 5 years or so, and they'll give you your back. And having that held over my head essentially was hard because with that comes conditional offers to pay for graduate school, Canadian graduate school, and so on. And so to say that I learned my lesson wouldn't be entirely true.
Yeah.
And to some extent, I became a team player. But I also learned how to play the games of the places that I was sitting in. And I think that every year that I have been in workplaces, I get more reps. Certainly now that I have a bunch of clients, I get reps and understanding behaviors from their lives as well as mine. It's very hard. Like on my Substack, I had a piece that came out last week called "They Will Harm You." I have a lot of clients who are very privileged, and sometimes when bad actors are trying to harm them, it takes me 30 minutes to convince them that the bad actors actually will be harmful. They don't want to believe they're being pushed out of their companies or that someone is trying to smear campaign them and so on. And so I think McKinsey's a great company. I love working there. I learned so much there. And at the same time, what I essentially learned is that in every ecosystem, there are some bad actors and that most ecosystems are not set up to handle that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like you said earlier, if there's a profit center, healthcare, unfortunately, is notorious for this. The top surgeon, clinically acclaimed, who treats people badly, creates an awful working environment. Hospital leaders often look the other way. Like this is a very well-known, consistent problem in healthcare, unfortunately, where you say, okay, that surgeon is, acting in ways that harm other professionals. They're creating an environment where the patient is more likely to be harmed. Mm-hmm. Sometimes executives make excuses or just look the other way.
What I find is that the systems are about their own incentives. The closer someone is to creating profit for a company, the more behavior gets overlooked.
Yeah.
So if you're like a star orthopedic surgeon, you can pretty much be an asshole to everyone in many contexts. You shouldn't be, but you can be. And in tech companies, I see this particularly with the engineering and sales functions. If you're a star ML engineer or if you're the highest grossing, salesperson, sometimes behavior gets overlooked. In investing, the investors who have the biggest, best deals in the most prestigious companies. And so it goes, right? In pretty much every system, that's what it looks like. And it's deeply unfortunate. And I think that for many people, when they first encounter this, it's their first major, oh my God, life really isn't fair. And it isn't fair.
Yeah. Our guest again, Kate Lowry. The book is Unbreakable: How to Thrive Under Fear-Based Leaders. It sounds like the book is directed toward people who don't have a choice, or at least in the short term don't have a choice. They need to not just survive, but thrive. But, in your coaching, it seems unlikely that a fear-based leader is going to reach out to ask for help. They think they're great leaders. I mean, does a board ever push somebody into coaching, or are you mostly working to help those who suffer under that fear-based leadership?
Absolutely. So I tend to work with people in the ecosystems who have power in the ecosystem. Because if I can shift their behavior, the environment gets better for everyone else. And that's really important. However, to work with me, they have to demonstrate they have at least a kernel of self-awareness and some interest in growing. Some leaders, I can't work with them because it's essentially become too late. They're surrounded by sycophants. They don't want to hear anything they don't want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
I'm essentially like a sycophant blocker. If you are my coaching client, I will tell you, hey, that behavior is not okay. You need to nip it in the bud. Hey, that wasn't an ethical thing to do. Like, we need to talk about. Or hey, you're about to accidentally drive your company off a cliff.
Yeah.
We have to talk about that. And so that draws certain types of people. I do have some clients who try to come in and bully me for certain things. Like, give me all of these investor intros, or I want all of your vendor connections. Or I only want that, and I want no coaching. And I tell them, no, you have to be a coaching client, because if I'm going to vouch for you with my people who are good people, you can't be a bull in a china shop. But, like, get in line.
Or you'll turn them away.
Exactly.
With that choice, yes.
Yeah, and being an independent coach is critical, because I can say to them, hey, I have no vested interest except that you are successful in the way that you define success. And also, like, I'm nobody's man, right? I'm not paid by a venture fund. I'm not paid by a corporate player. I'm just there.
Yeah. And I mean, one thing I thought about early in my career, General Motors environment was absolutely a fear-based environment. I saw firsthand that style of leadership wasn't leading to good success. It wasn't even those situations where like, the environment was terrible, but we performed well. No, I mean, performance was terrible. Everything you described sounds true. People get scared. They stop speaking up. They start hiding problems instead of being able to solve problems. And, one fear I had, and I left that environment after 2 years to go to grad school, was, how was there a danger of staying in that environment too long to where it would change or start shaping me in ways that young, naive, go-getter 21-year-old wouldn't want to recognize in a 30-year-old who had been shaped too much by that system. So I rejected it. I rebelled against it. I got out. But I was, always thinking about, some of these leaders that have been acting this way for 30 years. It's probably too late, but can we affect the next generation of leaders? And so maybe, a question to you is there better hope to affect the next generation of founders coming out of school, the next generation of CEOs, to help them see the research and the studies and things that point to what logically, rationally should be the choice of leadership style?
What I can say is that it's never too late. Yeah. I was once on a podcast interview where someone realized they were a fear-based leader while they were talking, Keith.
Oh.
And I said to them, every day is the first day of the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm.
All change starts with wanting to change, but it takes work, right? And I have so much hope for Gen Z. What I see is very polarizing. There are bad actors in Gen Z, but I also see that there is a generation that is so much more awake. They see through what they would call like corporate BS, or inclined to start their own companies if they can't find companies that match their values.
Yeah.
Many of them would rather make less money, but be doing things that they feel like is ethically aligned with what they care about. And that is really special because it suggests to me that, socio-emotional learning is happening. People are becoming more self-aware. And there's certainly much more awareness around compassion, setting boundaries, standing up for yourself. So every generation, I get more.
Yeah. Yeah. Help us understand, how do you distinguish when we think of characteristics or behaviors, or maybe, some examples would help distinguishing between a leader who is, let's just say, tough and demanding and hardworking and has high expectations versus somebody who's fear-based?
Certainly. I mean, I would say that some of my employees might say that I have high standards, but there's a difference between high standards in a compassionate way, which says, I see how much potential you have and I know you can do great things. So like every day I'm going to work with you and we're going to raise the bar by 5 inches because I know you can do it. Because I believe in you, right?
Yeah, right.
But it's totally different than a fear-based leader who says, there's no such thing as equality. I'm either above you or you're above me. And so I'm going to step on you and you better give me what I want. And, people have different masks that overshadow this behavior, particularly in nonprofits or universities, admins, things like that. Where on the West Coast, it can be layered into like West Coast nice. They'll say things like, I'm just going to take the pen here on this project, which means you're doing a terrible job and I don't like. And so on and so on. And so if you find that after interacting with people, you feel worse, you dread the meetings with your boss, you don't want to go to work on a Monday. When you have a one-on-one, you come out feeling less competent than when you went in. That's the sign that you're around someone who likely is using different types of control tactics. There are some very exceptional cases sometimes that happen when someone very senior is stuck interfacing with someone very junior. But beyond cases like that, I really think that people know in their gut when they're around people who aren't treating them well.
Yeah.
I was just talking to a client yesterday who her boss had been exploiting her, making her work 2 full-time jobs while only paying her for 1. And she knew, like, in her gut that something was wrong. Even though that boss was saying, I care about you. You're the best. I could never do this without you.
Yeah.
She wasn't being treated well.
Yeah. The fear-based leadership that I was exposed to was almost like cartoonishly obvious. I mean, direct threats, yelling, screaming, swearing, stomping your feet. So, I mean, like just cartoonishly, overtly fear-driven and insulting and demeaning and just cartoonishly bad. But I think you're bringing up, I'd love to hear a little bit more around, the polite fear-based leadership, the passive aggressive. I mean, what I saw was just aggressive, or even manipulative fear-based leadership where people might take a while to realize, oh, as you framed it, that person does not have my best interests at heart. They are using me. They are extracting work from me to my detriment, maybe. Or they're hanging that fear over your head in a way that's destructive.
Yes, there are cartoonish figures, particularly in tech, where people have meetings where people yell and throw things, and that's very easy to bear. But the second thing, which is like more covert fear-based leadership, is harder to recognize. It is much more common with female fear-based leaders, where they might say things like, this deck is totally worthless, but don't worry, I'm here for you. We're going to fix it. Or they might say, you remind me so much of my younger self. You have no confidence and you'll never make it on your own. And if you follow what I do, like, I can help you get through this. Or sometimes fear-based leaders like this, for example, I have a friend who's stuck under a fear-based leader right now. And her boss goes on harangues about how they are collectively incompetent. We can never do anything right. We'll never be able to do things that the CFO wants, and so on and so on and so on. But I found that big tech is the quietest form of fear-based leader. We've seen, I used to work at Meta, we've seen Mark Zuckerberg saying the company needs more masculine energy, instituting 20% layoffs, things like that. And often there, you will have very subtle cues that you are not a culture where people will say, I'm just not sure that you're right for this project. Let me take it away. While slowly removing all your responsibilities. Or in my case, I know several clients who have been pushed out either of their startups or big tech companies, specifically because they either disclose a disability or go on medical leave, or because they become a new parent. And oftentimes the messages are, oh, you're a parent now. We just don't want you to have too much on your plate. We're doing all work that, allows them to get promoted. Or, you know what? We just don't need you here anymore, right? It's very subtle. And the only ways you pick up on it is by looking at the aggregate pattern. Because people come to me and they'll say, I have a sense of unease. I'm uneasy. I feel like something's not right. I just got taken off of 5 of the recurring meetings. I don't know why. Right. How do I fix this? And sometimes the answer is you can't fix it. They don't want you there. So we're going to defend you as best we can, get you the most severance, help you, protectively get out unemployment or take a leave or do whatever it is that you need to do. But if people don't want you, you shouldn't stay in a place like that.
Yeah. The one thing I think is hard to figure out about fear-based leaders is they probably think they have good intentions, especially for the business, that they might think fear drives performance, fear of being fired, fear of losing out on a promotion. They might think fear of punishment prevents mistakes. And that's kind of the hard thing to sort out. They might not, like a fear-based leader might not be trying to actively harm others. They might not be a sociopath, but they might just have, maybe they got exposed to these models of fear-based leadership that they've started emulating. And they think we have to manage this. They think that's the path. That's kind of hard to sort through.
Oh my goodness. It's really hard. And, I kind of bucket fear-based leaders into 2 categories. There are people who have very deep-seated insecurities who do have more actual pathology who are fear-based leaders. And then there are people who are just copying what they see above them to try to survive. Mm-hmm. I talk about this some about my work at Insight and the Complete that I filed, where, allegedly I kind of saw these patterns where in the TV show How I Met Your Mother, you see the cartoon where boss yells at man, who yells at wife, who yells at kid, who yells at boss. Yeah. There is a certain pattern where when people at the very top shout and scream and pressure and motivated by fear, the person below them goes, oh my God, who do that to the person below me? And over time, it becomes embedded in the cultural norms to the point where separate who was like that to begin with. And I think
so again, I'm having flashbacks, to 30 years ago, where the one leader in our factory who I would characterize as a bully, I thought he enjoyed being a bully. That's how it appeared. Is I was getting ready to leave for grad school. I had nothing to lose, and after seeing him put on a performance one day of yelling and screaming at one of the area production managers, I basically asked some form of the question of help me understand what happened and why you behaved that way. I was open, I was asking him to coach me or something. And he very quickly traced it all the way up to the General Motors board of directors. That would have been probably 6 or 7 levels up from him. And he explained exactly what you did. It's well, I'm only yelling at Todd because I got yelled at by Jack and Jack got yelled at by so-and-so. And he basically just sort of, he didn't say, I don't want to act this way, but he very much excused it as, well, this is how things are done here.
I have so much empathy for that. I was raised in a family where both of my parents were fear-based leaders, and I was taught to be, right, take over the family dynasty. You're the daughter of a patriarch, learn how to be this way around other people. And I tried that. I tried yelling at other people and being someone I didn't like being, and it was not for me, right? I realized that it does cause harm. And so I said, not for me. And I immediately did hundreds of hours of therapy and put myself in coaching and read all the books. And so just to say that I have compassion for people who are fear-based leaders, maybe an understatement. Many of them have never known safely loved unconditionally,
Mm-hmm.
don't know how to unconditionally love themselves.
Mhm.
And so I hope they can be different, but most of them are not willing to go through the process of feeling remorse. If they realize the totality of the harm that they caused over, a 50-year period of being in the workforce or something,
Uh-huh.
man, that's rough. It's really, really rough.
Yeah.
And so most people shy away from that.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear you, if you will, rebelled against that or rejected that or decided to break that cycle and forge a different path. But here you go, bumping into it. I'm glad you're motivated to help people through the book and other things you do. So, if somebody is stuck in this kind of situation, you write a lot of people's instinct. I mean, this is maybe fight or flight, or to fight back or to shut down, and you say both approaches are wrong. What do you recommend people do? That's
Absolutely. So my book has like 30 different tactics that you can try against fear-based leaders to preserve agency and autonomy. And it's written having me battle tested that, both in elite halls of business, in families, in community groups, etc. And so one of the first things that I say is that unsafe people don't deserve your whole self. So you immediately need to be very mindful of the information that you share. Share the absolute minimum of information about what you care about. Because if you say, oh my God, I'm so excited to go to my kid's Little League game on Friday, they're going to make you work for the Little League game, right?
Yeah.
If you say like, oh, I can't wait to do this work initiative that we've been working on for so long, they'll kill the project. And so oftentimes that means that when you negotiate with them, in my book, I call this negotiating with thieves, you essentially have to approach it in a different way where you give them dummy initiatives that you want to be killed and pick the one that you want to settle over. Same thing with like resource expectations, right? If you need resourcing for your projects at work, you have to ask for twice as much as you want because they will gleefully cut half of it to try to punish you.
Yes.
And people often don't understand that these theories are very much motivated by attention. So if you modulate your availability and how much attention you give them, it reasserts your leverage, right? Even just being offline for half a day because you're quote unquote on a plane or at the doctor or whatever can cause them to spiral and reassert that actually you have power over them and so on.
Yeah. And you also write that the fear-based leaders are actually very predictable when you understand their rules. What are some of the rules that we need to be most mindful of?
Absolutely. So fear-based leaders are extremely predictable, but they essentially operate on a different radio channel than ethical people do. So if we're on AM, they're on FM, and you have to figure out how to tune into their channel. So, for example, one of the things that I talk about is if you can clock your executive's emotional age, you can then predict their behavior. Do they get bored in meetings and throw tantrums and, have a very short attention span? Well, maybe they're an emotional 2-year-old, which means you need to bring lots of snacks to your meetings, make them shorter, have lots of break topics to distract them.
Yeah.
If you have a CEO who is, oops,
Oh, we lost your video.
we should put it back on. If you have like a CEO who, is an emotional 8-year-old, they might be very obsessed with certain types of technology, or, perhaps they have all these pet projects. And so knowing, what's really important to them does, significantly matter, right? Because if you know what motivates them, then you can help make sure that you are able to predict what they're going to want, and they're going to need. But in general, they will try to maximize the type of harm they can inflict. They want to assert that they're on a pedestal above you. So if they don't feel dominant, they're going to try to step or press people down to make them feel dominant. So there are ways to validate them that reinforce that you're respecting the hierarchy.
Mm-hmm.
And then the way that they see people is very one-dimensional.
Yeah.
So if you figure out how they can see you, which may be, for example, they see you as the weak HR person, or they see you as the ally who executes for them. You can essentially play into those roles in ways that disguise what you actually do or what you actually care about. And so on.
Yeah. And we talk about that emotional age. I'm not going to name names, but I know I've heard this similar story from different people who had worked with a very famous multiple tech company CEO who said he's basically a 12-year-old boy.
Yes.
Treat him that way and expect him to act like a 12-year-old boy. And he's about 4 times that age or more, but stunted, apparently,
Yeah.
12-year-old developmental level, but incredibly successful in spite of it. And that's what's hard to figure out. I don't know if it goes into the category of life's not fair or just life's complicated, that sometimes people succeed in spite of themselves.
People so often don't realize that people's body ages don't often match their emotional age. Essentially, for people that don't have strong, secure attachment figures as they're growing up, they often get stuck and don't fully mature. And this is where you get statements like, oh my God, Steve is 80, but I swear he's just like a 5-year-old. Or like, this work project feels just like high school, right?
Yeah.
And being able to recognize that, like I have a chart in my book that helps with that, means that you can meet people where they're at. Because some people that have a body age of 50, you know what? Like, they don't have the emotional intelligence of a 50-year-old. So you need to act like they are younger than they were.
Yeah. And you may luck out and work for somebody who is physically younger, but as sometimes people say, oh, they're wise beyond their years. That's maybe a better workplace situation.
I get that a lot.
Yeah.
Where like oftentimes with my clients, especially the other plaintiffs that I help advise, I'm knocking heads for them with like dealing with people who are 60 and saying, no, I'm half your age and I'm just as competent. It's a different type of battle.
No. You mentioned it briefly, and you've been writing and posting updates on your website, and there'll be all sorts of links in the show notes to Kate's book and website and more. You have a lawsuit pending against a venture capital firm that alleges a pattern of fear-based leadership and discrimination and retaliation. Like, I guess the question is, when does cross a line from this is a situation I need to just leave versus something that becomes legally actionable or discriminatory or hostile work environment type level?
Yeah, so this is something I work on a lot with different clients who are stuck in power structures, whether it's that they have predatory investors or something else. What I can say is it's a very personal choice whether or not you take public action against someone. In my case, I felt like there were not enough role models in the industry calling out extralegal behavior by very wealthy and powerful people. And I think we're in an age where people need help. They need to know that it's possible to call out, big players and hold them accountable, because we kind of have a cultural allergy to accountability right now. For individuals who are struggling with this, what I would say is you have to show that you've exhausted internal paths. So in my case, I did, monitored feedback session with folks. I did advising with my skip level, asking them for advice. I reported to HR. I asked to switch teams. I talked to HR again. I tried to settle privately, and then so on and so on. And so the public suit is really a culmination of 3 years of escalation where I tried and tried and tried and tried. And there was just no way to make it work. And people who are in situations like that, I say, if you're a whistleblower, like, come talk to me. I will help you regardless of whether you become a client of mine. Like, if you need help finding a reporter to talk to anonymously, if you need help finding a good lawyer, if you need help learning how to navigate these spaces where bad actors want to splash you, you're not alone, right? I heard from hundreds of tech workers after my suit came out, and they are all saying the same things. Oh my gosh, this happened to me too. I was scared to do anything, or I tried to do this, but I got stuck in arbitration, or I tried to do this and the security threats got to be too much. I just couldn't handle it. And so it's genuinely hard, but sometimes people really do have to take a suit.
And there would be a lot of reasons for people to fear the repercussions for their career, for their life, for their finances, to take that stand. So
there are extreme consequences, which I live with daily, both professionally and personally. And so, yeah, I think that it's not something that people should do lightly.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you, Kate, for sharing your story, your stories, your book, your efforts to help other people, and thank you for your leadership on an issue I think is critically important. The impact that fear-based leadership and related management or leadership dysfunctions has on people's lives is immense. The connections and research around bullying and bad work environments, not just having an impact on people's mental health, but on their physical health is immense. Thank you for your leadership and for the visibility that you're bringing to that issue. And, I certainly hope things work out for you and, that others, who are listening because they're in a situation like that. I hope you're able to get yourself into a better situation and that it inspires you to be a better leader. So with that, Kate, I'll give you the last word.
What I would say is just because systems are stacked against you does not mean you have no power. You're more powerful than you think, and every person, including you, really matters.
Well, thank you, Kate. Again, Kate Lowry, her website is katelowry.com. The book, the title again is Unbreakable: How to Thrive Under Fear-Based Leaders.
Yeah, definitely.
That's all right. Momentary interruptions. I'm glad that didn't throw it off. So again, Kate, thank you so much for joining us and being a guest today. Best wishes to you.
Thank you so much for having me, Mark.
Sure.
As always, I want to thank you for listening. I hope this podcast inspires you to reflect on your own mistakes, how you can learn from them or turn them into a positive. I've had listeners tell me they started being more open and honest about mistakes in their work. And they're trying to create a workplace culture where it's safe to speak up about problems, because that leads to more improvement and better business results. If you have feedback or a story to share, you can email me, myfavoritemistakepodcast@gmail.com. And again, our website is myfavoritemistakepodcast.com.